complex chronic illness, and a broken health system in one show? Today we try. Olivia, hello.
Hi.
I'm so thrilled to have you publicly this time on the podcast. You were a part of our incredible team that helped me bring the Mold Festival to life last year, tackling chronic illness and safety in long hauler type illnesses and how it can be such a factor. And today we will definitely be looking at that psychoneuro piece. But I want to start by asking you, because I've just found out today that we both have a huge part of our education in common. And it's not the medical part, it's the diplomacy, political science, languages part. How good is that?
Didn't know that about you either. This is
Mm-mm.
yeah, so fortuitous.
Bizarre. And so tell me, how did that start your tertiary education and then you went into med, or did you just decide, this is too light a load, I'm going to add some arts in here?
Wow, so I've always been my mother is an arts leaning person, so she was a writer and editor. My father is a vet
Mm-hmm.
and an engineer. So I've always sort of been both brained, I think. And I didn't get into med like I was kind of slated for, I suppose. I had a couple of scholarships in high school in anticipation of med for uni because my mum died in year 12 and I was pulled out of school for a few months because she passed away in the US. So we went there for a few months. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do because I'd always thought I'd do med. And then eventually I did go back to uni to do international relations because I then had this idea in my head that I would um, do diplomacy. And I did really well in international relations and then got into med that way. Um, and so I wound up going back to medicine like how I always wanted. And international relations was a great degree to have under my belt,
Mm.
especially diplomacy and of course French, um, because there is definitely something to be said about having a more rounded education for a doctor. I think we have a lot
Mm.
of doctors
For
getting into
humans
medicine.
as
Yes,
well.
right.
I just think it breaks my heart that they've jacked up the cost of humanities degrees, because they literally teach you how to have to back up your point in 10,000 words over and over again and consider
And learning how
multiple
to philosophize.
perspectives and
Yeah,
philosophize. Exactly. I think
yeah.
the world could do with a lot more of that.
That's right, because medicine tends to be very didactic, right?
Mm.
These are the facts. You learn it as such, and then you regurgitate it. I mean, they don't obviously say that, but
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that over the last few years, it does seem like that, and which is bizarre because in medical school, our professors, several of them will actually say 50% of what you are learning now
Mm.
is going to be wrong. We just don't know which 50% it is. Ha ha ha. And they say it very glibly. And I've heard it repeated several times by several eminent doctors on podcasts and so on and so forth. But when it comes down to the crunch, nobody acts as if they're at the bottom of the Dunning-Kruger curve.
Mm.
Everybody believes that everything that they say that comes out of their mouth is 100% true, safe and effective. And it's it's I think that we really need to go back to re-exploring the concept, the fact of the matter that yes, a lot of what we learn in medical school is probably not as correct as we think it is. And how do we get back in touch with that humility so that we don't cause harm?
Mm.
Because that
Oh,
is what I see is becoming more and more of a problem. Sorry, can you indulge me a little bit? I have a quick story.
yeah.
I've noticed that on social media, I'm mostly on Instagram, so I'll use that as an example. I've noticed that uh, other doctors will say, you're fear mongering. or don't be alarmist
Mm,
as a drop mic. They say that and then they think that that's that. In other words, there seems to be now this move towards prove that something is dangerous, as opposed to my point of view, which is prove that something is safe first. And I suppose that there's a place for both of these opinions.
mm,
But when did something can be let loose on a population before you prove it's unsafe trump first do no harm?
mm.
And I'm actually, me and my research partner are going to start writing a bit of an opinion piece about this drop mic that I've noticed a lot of people on social media are employing. The whole,
Yeah.
you're being a fearmonger, full
Mm-hmm.
stop, end of story. It's like, hang on a second, I'm just telling my followers on my channel about
Mm,
a study that is stating that some chemicals in sunscreen haven't been proven to be safe, and now they're nanonized, and one application today you can still find those chemicals in your blood 30 days later. This is an FDA study. Why is it just posting about the study makes me a fearmonger? Okay,
mm-hmm.
my rant is over.
No, and I think it's a justified rant. And sometimes this is where it frustrates me that people don't have historical context, that people haven't studied politics in the past and the way we've formed democracy as we currently know it. And in its weaknesses and with its cracks. And there were many, many, many people who had to die, who had to put their hands up and say, something ain't right in the roof, boss. I'm sick. I'm feeling sick. I've got this cough. Like before asbestos was finally
Mm,
given its moment, before radium, before lead in the paint, lead in the petrol, lead in the pencils, for God's sakes, that all the kids were chewing, lowering our IQs. I mean, we could go on and on about how much it takes to try and be the crazy people sounding alarms until
mm.
someone
Because
finally
you're a
says,
fearmonger and you're an
mm,
alarmist, and
mm,
and a lot of people don't realize how much the government relies on a um, almost like a complaints driven system,
mm-hmm.
because there sometimes isn't money or even assays in the beginning to
Or
to test things.
Or sometimes there is money. It's just the wrong kind of money going to the wrong kind of people.
Exactly. Or
Mm,
how much government is relying on industry to be honest or to be prudent.
mm.
And that's we can all see how that
We
could be a
can.
problem. Yeah.
And I mean, so many times we've seen it, and it's been beautifully depicted in a lot of dramas over the years in courtrooms, based on true stories, great documentaries these days as well. I mean, Sean Penn even put his hand up and said, "This whole environmental toxin thing ain't cool. Let's do something on this." And it's about getting loud enough until you can see the elected officials saying to each other behind closed doors, this isn't going away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's that moment. And we've seen it so many times in history. And I think we are at a crisis point with medicine where governments want to be respected. And that's right, left, name your party. They're all poisoned in some way because of the system. But they want to be respected, and yet they keep covering things up, whatever those things are. And because there's so much more freedom of information, people find out much more easily. And we're like,
But
we're
there's
not
so much
okay
noise
with
as well.
this. But
There's so
then,
much noise,
which becomes a
and then it gets
problem.
buried.
Yeah.
Yes, right, because nobody really, I mean, more people are watching TikTok videos or Instagram videos than they are watching the news. And
Mm,
the major news outlets are captured as well by corporate. So, you're only going to be able to get like three stories out there. and it all
Mm.
has to be clickbaity. So you're not going to talk about really hard hitting stuff because people don't even understand it anymore. So you're going to talk about which celebrity has had, you know, which filler done. I don't even, I don't even know.
It's
I
a
don't even know.
it can be very broken when you listen to what we just said. And
Yeah.
it can be very tough to think, could there ever be a way through this? But I want to ask you, because you go to a lot of conferences, you speak to a lot of people who are more in the pioneering space, I would say. But in terms of just research, this is something a lot of people are really concerned about. Research funding and dollars.
Mm.
Are you seeing research being done well or better in certain places, institutions, or are there just holes in most things these days? Like,
Yeah.
these days we see name your scientist, does a piece of research, creates a supplement brand around it based on a study, or, and then the next thing. And then I'm not trying to poo-poo anyone's work, but I am saying it's corporatized. The whole thing's become corporatized. And I think that's a huge part of the problem.
There's also an issue, I think, where you have a gap between research and clinical. And
Mm,
there's meant to be this division because, like you said, you can't be doing research and then all of a sudden you're selling a supplement based off your research. I mean, the ethics of that are just mind-boggling. But anyway, and especially so, I speak in the longevity field a little bit. I am. There are many much more seasoned longevity experts than myself. But one thing I have found is that you have the researchers and clinicians speaking at the same conference at a longevity
mm,
summit, for example. And the researchers are talking about molecules and substances that are extending life in mice, for example. Exactly the kind of things that they're studying, which is great. But because they're sharing the same stage as clinicians, sometimes some attendees don't realize that there is a lot of work that needs to go into the um, field before you can translate
mm,
mice studies to humans. And then you get this flurry of activity of people going out to buy these different supplements based off research in mice. And that creates all sorts of issues. There is a translatability gap that needs to be respected first and foremost, and not understanding the uh, the system,
mm,
not understanding where the marketing is, where the marketing starts, and where the facts begin. That um, that part I find very disconcerting.
mm.
Um, it's not
So,
just drugs.
no, it wouldn't be. So let's just say a drug is found to have, or a supplement is found to have an amazing benefit for, let's say, depression in mice. And everyone's excited. The supplement seems even quite safe to like jump onto right now. But what would the best process be when that study's been done? To like, what's the next step that would be better than all of us jumping on it as if this was truth and let's just roll it out? Because I think this is interesting for people to learn what would actually be
Sure.
correct.
Yeah. Well, I can't really talk to that because I'm not a bench scientist,
Mm,
and I'm not really involved in the research arm to many things. What I can speak to is that I am a clinician.
yes. So as a
We keep,
clinician, what do you
yeah,
want to see?
right. And we need to start treating the patient in front of us as a whole person,
Mm,
not just the numbers on a page. In other words, it's been going on for far too long.
mm,
Decades of you have this symptom, therefore you get this pill.
hmm.
That is complete and utter rubbish.
Yeah.
The person in front of you is made up of their environment, their psychology, their family, their biology, their genetics. I could go on and on. Everybody knows this, right?
Mm.
How do you distill someone down to a number on a page and then to an algorithm that spits out that they get a pill? So even just let's say paracetamol. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh, one of my favorite not. Yeah.
exactly. Right. 500 milligrams a
Mm.
tablet, 1 gram for two. That is the dose that you give to a 14-year-old girl who's got menstrual cramps, and also to a 65-year-old man with no liver issues who has a thumping migraine. Uh, and it's not, we have stopped as clinicians, we have stopped saying, okay, what else is going on with your life? Let's talk about the migraine, let's talk about the period cramps, you know, the pulling that pulling on that thread and pulling apart that tapestry to then figure out how do we prevent this from happening again.
Mm.
What is this pain telling us, right? Because we're so used to throwing band-aids on things, and then we're so confused when people, by the time people are 30, they've accumulated at least 2, 3, 4 diagnoses, and are on at least 2, 3, 4 pills.
Mm.
So this whole, like, okay, what is the next step once you discover a molecule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That actually, for me, I'm not really that interested in that, because I know when it comes to the clinical picture with the patient, I'm never, ever going to be relying on one thing to be helping the patient in front of me.
Mm.
And I'm really enamored by psychoneuroimmunology, and so that was where my expertise lies. And I have colleagues who are much better at biochemistry, or who specialize in hematology or in rheumatology or something like that. But a GP or generalist, or someone who speaks to a patient um, with their day-to-day issues,
Mm.
needs to respect that there's so many things that go into a patient. And that's what we need to get back at. We need to stop being so reductionist.
Mm. And so would you say then that it's really important for us to stop being so excited by one study's finding? Because I feel like the media jumps on it, and then there's the article on the red meat again, and then, or
Oh,
the I mean, how many times do we have to fight that one? Then there's, the medical community who are just desperate to have something to throw at being able to help patients better that looks positive.
yeah,
I feel like, and then we want the silver bullet. I feel like
yeah,
culturally, professionally, we're all after a silver bullet.
yeah.
How do we progress to whole body medicine? How do we actually do that? Is it actually going to be a people's movement? It feels like there's a pretty big groundswell already for those of us who are into it and exploring it. I mean, I remember when I started Low Tox Life, I was like, okay, I'm swapping my personal care. Okay, I've gotten rid of all the additives out of the food. Oh shit, home. Oh my God, the way we think about it all. I
Yeah,
was coaching people, and then they were freaking out that they weren't going to be able to eat organic 100%. And I'm like, that's part of the problem. Like, we
mhm,
can't, that's part of ill health,
yeah, yeah,
to stress out so much. So it really is all interconnected. And I feel like it is conversations like this. It is conferences that you're going to where the psychoneuroimmunology field is exploding. Thank God.
yeah.
Uh,
Thank goodness. The
so,
Gabor Mate of the world, the Joe Dispenzas, the
mhm,
Bessel van der Kolks. There are more and more people talking about the interconnectedness, and they have the studies to back them up.
yeah,
The problem with the field is that the studies come from all over the place, from psychology, immunology, neurology, right? And so you have to
mm,
piece it all together. There isn't a stream that is PNI. Um, at the hospital or in medical school. But the more people's eyes are opened, because all you have to realize is that everything is connected. Once you
Mm,
realize that, once you open that door, then hopefully your mind is asking, what about this? What about this? You're asking more curious questions.
mm-hmm.
So I was at a conference not last year. It was a neurotrauma conference, brain trauma conference in Germany, and I actually was speaking to a neurologist who hadn't even heard of neuroimmunology. Now that's, I mean,
Wow.
as a stream, it was confusing for me. Um, I mean, maybe it was because he was older or whatever. But for example, when I was in hospital in Australia doing my residency, there was a pediatrician there who stated at a grand rounds, so he wasn't presenting at the grand rounds, but he stated at the grand rounds during Q&A that the brain stops developing after age 25. Right, exactly. We know that that's not so. So there are
Wow.
right. So
Okay.
there are lots of issues with the system for sure that we're going to
Mm,
have to somehow address. And one of them, in my opinion, is that the kind of conferences that specialists in Australia, it's the only system I really know, the kind of conferences that the specialists go to
mm,
needs to be more inclusive and needs to be have a wider bandwidth
yeah.
because they go to the same conferences organized by the same pharmaceutical companies, spoken at by the same doctors. All they're after is their CPD points,
Mm,
and there's no incentive in the system for doctors to think outside the box,
mm,
to be left afield, to explore more questions. There's no incentive. And actually, the incentive seems to be stay in your lane, do exactly as the algorithm says, and no more for your patient, and you will never be audited. You will never have a colleague complain about you because in Australia, the number one reason why clinicians are investigated by APRA, which
mm.
is the Australian Health Practitioners Regulatory Agency, is by a complaint from a colleague, not from patients. So there's a lot of this, dobbing in of, well, I say dobbing in implies that the clinician is doing something wrong. Actually, a majority of colleagues, when they complain about someone to APRA, it's because that person is doing something different outside of the algorithm. That's
That's
of course
insane.
it is.
Yeah.
Look, of course you have to be safe, and of course the algorithms and the flow charts and what have you are there for patient safety.
Mm,
But there are windows of tolerance,
mm,
and we have to be given some leeway to explore some of these windows with the patients we have in front of us, because we know those patients, right? I'll tell you now, those flow charts, the algorithms thrown out by governments and by the royal colleges of medicine, they're not built, generally speaking, on genetics, epigenetics, and so on and so forth. They are meant to be broad strokes. They are meant to hopefully touch the majority of the population, in that
mm,
bell curve, and not everybody fits into the meat of the bell curve.
mm. And then if you try to help someone who doesn't, you could lose your license.
Yes, right. I mean, in Australia, that Charlie Teal, that's pretty much
Mm,
what happened to him. Um, what is the name of the? I'm looking it up now, actually. The person that did the first, uh, well, one of the first massive transplants, like hand, I think it was
mm,
a hand transplant, was Australian as well.
yeah.
Um, he got basically run out of town. You don't hear anything about him. He had
Wow.
to. He's revered overseas, and he did when he was alive. He was invited to do a lot of surgeries overseas, but in Australia, he was a pariah.
Hmm. Absolutely toxic is what that
Yeah,
is.
it's a
That's
very toxic
and
professional environment in Australia.
yeah, and I can understand why I end up interviewing what I think I've probably interviewed over 300 doctors out of our sort of 400 interviews, and most almost everybody, I think, has said something along the lines of,
Mhm.
I'll never forget in my residency, I questioned why we couldn't give vitamin D to children in the psychiatry, just to
Mm,
try because we had some research and shut down. Or,
shut
and
down.
that is just one story of bazillions that I've heard from doctors. And I don't think it's doing people much good, unfortunately, because it's actually creating a sense of, if you want the good medicine, the guys and girls who are thinking outside the box, then you need to be extremely financially privileged.
You do, yeah, and that's the thing. So, just to put it out there for, there are lots of patients who ask, why are my consults, for example, not covered by Medicare, not covered by insurance, and all the rest of it? And this is the
Mm,
simple answer: if someone else pays for your consult, someone else has a say in the
mm,
consult, right? Independent thought. You can sort of see why the government does it. Basically, the government is only going to pay for things that they believe is going to work for the majority of people. And it's meant to be a safety net.
mm-hmm,
It's meant to catch the majority of people. It was never meant to be, my understanding, that universal healthcare was never meant to be the epitome of advancements, right?
mm,
It's the system, the financial aspects to things doesn't cover that. So it was meant to sort of be a safety net, and to help the majority of people with sort of majority of simple ailments. It was formulated in an era where we didn't have these chronic conditions that were
mm,
plaguing patients for decades and decades, because it will financially cripple the
yeah,
government at some point, just like it did in the UK, or just
mm,
like it is doing in the UK. And because Australians have been so used to the government picking up the tab for their medical expenses, they're loath to pay their doctor,
mm.
uh, privately. So you'll find that patients will have a Netflix account, a Prime account, a Disney account.
Yeah,
They will have a cappuccino every day, but
yeah,
there is something about the population and our mindset where they won't pay for private health. Now, of course, I would also be loath to pay for something that person is saying the exact same thing as the universal healthcare doctor next door.
mm,
But if you want an opinion that's a little bit different,
mm,
and that opinion was probably formulated by going to lots of different conferences, by going for doing
mm.
lots of different courses, etc., 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 then yeah, you need to contribute to that doctor's learning somehow, and it's to
Of
pay
course.
privately.
Oh, and I'm certainly not saying it wouldn't be worth it. I think the issue is that it's sad
Yeah,
that it
100%.
that you guys are all forced into that model,
Mm.
um, where ordinary people in a housing commission with a mold issue, let's say,
Yeah,
and they don't even know you exist,
yeah,
A.
yeah.
And B, if you're in welfare because you had to quit your job because you were that sick and now you're below the poverty line, so you're collecting payments, like then you can't pay privately. So there is a lot of, I guess, yeah, there are a lot of aspects to it that are, yes, great medicine is always going to be worth it. And at the same time, why isn't great medicine available for everyone? Because
I,
we don't recognize that doctors should be allowed to look at who's in front of them and make a call. if there's a consensual, mutual relationship between doctor and patient to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. And also there seems to be this opinion that, I think we've mentioned this before off camera, that the science is settled,
Oh my
i.e.,
gosh.
right? And it isn't.
Mm-mm.
So if we're talking about vitamin D, for example, I can show you the studies that correlate increased tonsil size, adenoid size with low vitamin D,
Mm.
right? A weakened immune system with low vitamin D. I can show you the studies that talk about the fact that our vitamin D reference range is probably inadequate. In other
Mm.
words, even if your vitamin D is normal, it's probably not. And
Oh my gosh, while we're here, is 120 okay?
well, I mean, so I
I
would
just
say
got
yes.
mine back last week, so I figured I might as well ask.
So I would say yes, but
Hmm.
is like, why are we using the same reference range for you,
Mm.
as well as someone from South India?
Yeah.
So these sorts of questions aren't being asked by the doctors who should be asking them.
Hmm.
And because vitamin D isn't um, recommended for these children who've got normal vitamin D reference ranges, even though it seems clinically like what's happening with them, their symptoms might be due to an immune issue, might be due to low vitamin D. Even from the history, the patient isn't going out in the sun, for example, at all.
Mm.
There isn't this room to think.
Mm.
And if you maintain, don't worry about vitamin D supplementation, the reference range is fine. I know that your child's about to get his tonsils cut out, and it's probably got nothing to do with it. You're going to be fine, because that opinion, even though it's probably not entirely correct, that opinion is covered by the government. That opinion is
Mm.
covered by the workflow from the Royal College.
Yeah.
But if you were to step outside and say, wait, hang on a second, I saw this information from the US or from France or whatever it is, let's try some supplementation, let's see how you go. There is room in the guidelines now for a colleague to complain about you. Now, how far that complaint will go is another matter, and I hope never to experience this. But there is room for someone to complain about you because you are doing something outside of the guidelines, and it's ridiculous.
Hmm. And so, what are you guys doing as doctors who feel that this is ridiculous? Do you feel like there's a groundswell, or is there just an abdication from the system altogether?
Well, yes. Okay, so there is actually a groundswell. There is an organization called APHIS, Australian Health Practitioners Advisory Service, I believe.
Hmm.
So APHIS is a organization that doctors can join, where they are actually going to be somewhat protected
Yeah.
as a group. There are lawyers involved, all the rest of it, against these malicious, non-common sense allegations.
Mm.
Because right now, APRA, I've not had to thankfully deal with APRA myself, but it does seem from the colleagues who have been targeted by APRA that a lot of the time you are guilty until proven innocent, and
Mm.
it is stressful. The number of medical practitioners who commit suicide,
We could call them fearmongers then, couldn't we?
right? Who attempt to commit suicide every
Mm.
month is actually a lot higher than people realize,
Yeah.
because of how stressful these audits can be.
Mm.
Um, so when an audit is conducted against you, um, you are expected to do all that legwork, go through your records, hire an accountant, hire a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. You're meant to do all that whilst maintaining your full-time work.
Hmm.
Like it's on top of. Um, a very close friend of mine got audited, and it was not a malicious audit. He actually hadn't done anything wrong. There was a God, I don't know how much I can talk about this. So essentially, the government were lobbied by I think it was by respiratory physicians, so that they wanted to keep the majority of spirometry tests. They didn't really want GPs doing spirometry for whatever reason,
And what is spirometry?
sorry, lung function testing
Okay.
that you can do just in clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a that was sort of pushed through, and this friend of mine is an allergist.
Mm-hmm.
So he's not a respiratory physician and he's not a GP. He's an immunologist who did allergies. And of course, as you can imagine, inhalant allergies are a big part of what he does. And so he was doing spirometries, but because he wasn't a respiratory physician and he was doing a lot of these lung function tests, he got audited.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow.
it was one of the most stressful things that happened to this friend of mine.
Mm.
Um, and anyway, there were a lot of painful points with this, but
Does the spirometry have to get sent off
mhm,
for, so it's something you're doing because you're trained to do it?
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So why should it
So,
matter that you want to do one if you want to check your patient's lung function? How on earth is that risky?
uh, well, so,
Help me
so,
understand.
so in Australia,
Uh-huh.
right, procedures bag you more money from the government than consults do.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter what the procedure is, whether it's a skin check or it's a lung function test. That's where you're going to make more money
Got it.
than just a simple consult. So look, I'm sure the issue is much more complicated than I can ever elucidate. All I know
Ah,
is that
I
all I
see.
know is yeah, all I
Mm,
know is that um, the APAS organizations like APAS, which are bringing together doctors who are frustrated with the system because of the fact that you are guilty until proven otherwise, because it's basically a star court. There is no organization, there is no government organization that oversees the goings on of APRA. So APRA is almost a law unto itself.
mm,
It can hound doctors, it can uh, leave you for dead, it can do all sorts to you, and there's nobody overseeing what they do to doctors. And it's a
right.
very dangerous, scary proposition. So yeah, there are many of us who have joined APIS, for example, and there are many of us who decrease our volume, decrease our practice because we just want to do less and less and less with um, with the medical system in Australia. So
Mm,
I do far more speaking now, or podcasts, or writing, or corporate advising, or whatever,
mm,
because it's a very dangerous landscape to be in
mm.
if you are not uh, algorithmically driven.
Imagine it being dangerous to do your best to help people. I mean, if that's not a broken system, I don't know what is.
Y- y- Exactly.
And
You
so
know.
do you feel like, because I don't want this to be a doom and gloom conversation where we don't leave people with a potential sense that we could be a part of a better system. Um, would you love for people to start reaching out to their local MPs and saying, look, I've had a chronic illness. I've been gaslit. I've been this. I've been that. I've been driven to having to privately seek out people for my healthcare, and that costs me $400 a visit. And on and on. Like to actually start flooding our MPs with stories because I figure no one's telepathic, right? And like I said, these people over here don't even know you people exist. I'd say half the MPs in our country wouldn't have any idea about integrative medicine either.
Yeah,
Some do.
yeah.
And guess
Uh,
what? Some of those had mold illness, and that's why.
uh,
So, it really is something that you only know to need when you have exhausted every possible avenue. And it feels like most of the problems people have today are falling into that category more and more. And so we will need more and more doctors, not less and less, who are
yeah.
equipped to actually support patients.
So, absolutely, of course. People speaking to their local MPs and trying to get a groundswell, grassroots movement um, would be helpful, especially for environmental things like mold. I mean, that
Mm,
is part of the reason why I feel as if things just aren't moving the way they commonsensically would be moving is
mm,
because when a government acknowledges that there is a deficit or a problem, they also then become liable for
yes.
sins of omission, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which then they have to pay for. And so it's much easier to sweep something under the carpet and hope that it goes away at some point, whilst you slowly do make changes to the
Mm,
legislation. And because if it's a big song and dance, and people come out of the woodwork and start suing you for things in the past.
mm-hmm.
It's a little bit like the infected blood scandal
Yeah.
of the 80s or so, right?
Mm.
The thousands of Australians who got HIV or who died because of uh,
Blood
essentially
transfusion.
blood transfusion,
Mm,
use, reckless abuse of power when it comes to the blood. They're still fighting for compensation. They're still after a royal commission,
mm,
you know, and it's just. But if the government, I shouldn't say the government, but if the powers that be
mm,
wait long enough, there's not going to be anyone left to sue, right? And I kind of feel like that seems to be the case with a lot of things.
mm,
Um, so yes, it would be great for a groundswell movement, so on and so forth. However, my message, because I am a simple clinician with patients in front of me, and you know, my message actually is that we don't have to be saddled with the chronic diseases that with many of the chronic diseases, and certainly not the severity to which we are saddled
mm,
with some of these chronic diseases now, if we start taking control of our own health.
mm,
Because the only reason why you would need to um, see a doctor and then not be able to afford a doctor that can give you the advice that you need about a chronic condition, which, by the way, didn't exist 15, 20 years ago, like toxicant induced loss of tolerance. This is a new
mm,
diagnosis, right? Mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Like, all these syndromes are new and emerging.
mm,
We didn't really have the extent to which we have them now in our population. You can't
mm,
swing a cat now in a room without hitting someone with POTS, or without
mm.
hitting someone with MCAS or histamine intolerance or something like that. So it's getting out of control. The government and the colleges can't keep up with these new syndromes coming through. And I think that when patients realize how much is actually in their control, and they're
Mm,
able to, mm, take hold of it a little better, then they will start to dam the tide of patients needing to seek a doctor that's going to be out of their price range anyway.
mm,
So that's kind of where I'm at, because I really, the majority of patients who I see now, I can tell you that there is a big chunk of what's happening that is in their control. They
yeah.
just don't know it yet, right? Platforms like yours are a great way for patients to get information about changes they can make in their own home with their own body, that is going to move that needle towards health. And we just need 1%, 1%, 1%, and before you know it, it all adds up, and you've got 60, 70, 80% of your health back. You give your immune system breathing room, and your immune system kicks back in and is able to mop up the rest. Of course, I'm not saying this is for every patient, And I think that one of the biggest problems for patients now is that there's so much information out there. Who do you
Mm.
trust? How
Yeah.
do you curate the information for yourself, right? Which is why doctors were meant to be like a guide to
Mm.
help you curate what you need for you. So basically, the message that I think is important is, yes, do what you can with your government and with the local doctor. The local doctor knows that you have an interest in nutritional therapy or non-conventional modalities. Maybe they'll develop an interest too. And enough people are asking them about sauna, for example.
Mm.
Um, but it's also becoming health educated, health informed. No, learning the signals and the symptoms that you're having is actually your body talking to you, and then trying to figure out how to respond to your body in an appropriate way for you. I know it sounds, well, I don't have a medical degree. How am I supposed to know this? But there's
Mm.
actually a lot to be said about the fact that doctors were never meant to be as didactic, do as I say, take these pills type thing. We were never meant to be this way anyway. We're always just kind of meant to be guides, helping the patient come up to the helm, and then steering the ship with us, until such a time as you can steer your own ship.
Mm.
The uh, the health system that I'd heard about in ancient China, which I love, is that you pay your doctor when you're well.
Love. Love.
Right.
Imagine how
Can you
good.
imagine? And like our goal is that we don't see patients. So for me, I have this, it's an unspoken sort of, like, I don't write it on my website, but I do tell patients and my colleagues about it. And it's like, when I am referred a complex chronic condition patient, mystery illness or emergency syndrome, if I can't figure out what's wrong with the patient within 3 consults, then don't see me anymore. Right? Maybe
Mm.
come back in a year after I've got more information together. But I don't want to keep patients in my fold and then just, you know because what I know is what I know. There's always more to learn, of course, but I'm not doing it at the expense of my patient.
Mm. Wow. So let's talk about health cultivation then, because what you just shared somewhere in there was how much information there is, which means, for every protocol over here about a particular dietary way forward, there'll be an absolute opposite of that. There'll be someone saying salt protocol, like do the salt protocol. And then over here, it would be cut all the salt protocol. And then so,
Yeah,
of course, it is very hard for most people to just go, I'm just going to stop listening to all of it and I'm going to tune in. That in itself is almost a little bit overwhelming. I
yeah.
think for people to start undertaking, to start trusting when that trust has been so isolated from us through generations and generations of disconnection as well, mind you, not just because of social media. A lot of people blame socials for everything. And like, nah,
Mhm.
disconnection started a lot earlier than that.
Right.
And so when you have a patient in front of you who does feel like that hyper external pull to all the answers are out there and it's the next doctor's appointment that I'm going to start to feel better, um,
Yeah.
what, how do you gently help people back towards themselves? Like, what could people be doing that really made us start to go, I know what I need, and I'm not going to
Mm,
listen to anyone else tell me different?
mm. So there are two things. One is that, I do encourage patients to, because there's so many health influences out there, right?
Mm,
If you find someone who has a similar story to you, similar, where they live, or what they look like, or whatever it is, then just tune in just that little bit more to what they're saying about how they got over their illness, for example.
mm,
Because there's something to be said about the fact that, like you said, the vegan diet works wonders for some people and the carnivore diet works wonders for other people, right?
mm,
And that experimentation is never a waste of time.
Mm.
So in other words, by all means, do
Try
your little
something.
experiment,
Yeah.
try something different, because not doing anything differently is where you're going to fall down, because you're going to get the exact same result.
Mm.
So that's one. Two is that with all my patients, I will say to them that um, majority of the time, the symptoms that they're getting is actually their neuroimmune system trying to protect them.
Mm.
Not in a way that we understand in 2024, but considering that our neuroimmune system evolved millions of years ago, and a lot of the time, parts of it is evolutionarily conserved,
Mm.
and that the number one driver of our neuroimmune system is survival, not fulfillment, not a partner, not getting the promotion at work. It's survival. And you sort of look at it through that frame, that lens, you're going to start seeing it's like, okay, so what does a headache, for example? A headache means that you want to close your eyes and you want to rest.
Mm.
So why is your neuroimmune system doing that? What about your environment is making your body go, okay, I can't do this anymore. I want to rest. I want to close my eyes. I want to go into a dark room. I don't want any more light. I don't want any more sound. What's happening? Right.
Mm.
And then you can see, okay, it's the usual stuff, right? It's stress, it's environmental toxins, it's like not enough vitamins, minerals, not enough water, like really basic things. But when you see the symptom not as your body trying to hurt you, right? People
Mm.
fighting against their symptoms, fighting the disease, all that kind of stuff. What about it is my neuroimmune system thinking it's protecting me? You start to see things a little bit differently,
Mm.
because as well, your neuroimmune system, um, when it's trying to protect you, it's not necessarily against real threats. It can sometimes be against perceived threats, because there's something called the free energy principle. And the free energy principle is that your brain iterates uh, scenarios over and over and over and over again, um, so that it's able to increase response times, decrease response times, right? So it's able to protect you faster and then decrease surprise. What that means is that so a really simple example
Mm.
from an evolutionary perspective, if you have um, been exposed to a pollen and it irritated you,
Yeah.
and at the same time you were unwell with IBS or you were unwell with the flu, your immune system is going to tag that pollen and go, okay, that happened at the same time as my immune system was activated. Maybe it's part of the problem. And
Mm.
it tags it once, it tags it twice. If the immune system sees it enough times, it's going to go, yep, that pollen's a problem. So
Hmm.
you are actually able, for non-IgE allergies, you are actually able to change how your immune system uh, is activated against certain inputs, whether it's pollens, whether it's foods. The number of patients that I've dealt with these like sensitivities, where the sensitivity actually changes just based on how you're approaching that food, is incredible. I mean, part of it is the work of like Alia Crubb, for example.
Mhm.
So Alia, ALIA, um, she's got this several studies, one of which is that if you say to a patient that a milkshake, for example, is indulgent milkshake, and then another group, you say to them that it is a low fat, or
A
it's
meal replacement
a,
shake.
a
Yeah.
healthy shake,
Mm.
your hormones actually change. The
Hmm.
satiety hormone, leptin, ghrelin, it actually changes. Insulin, it actually changes with how you think about whatever it is that you're being faced with. Um, and so that is, it's a curiosity, but it's real. It's very real.
Mm.
It's very true, and it's in our control.
And that is so exciting. And at the same time, because I have worked on my psychoneuroimmuno responses to recover from mold and to not be hit sideways when I go to the post office and look up and see the
Uh,
revolting, like 5 years
Mm,
ago, I reckon that probably would have set me back for days, if not
yeah,
weeks.
yeah,
Whereas
yeah. Your
now
body's trying to protect you.
I write them an email. I say, this is not a healthy environment for the workers to be working in every day, and you should
Yeah,
really get that cleaned. But I don't think about it again. I didn't think about it
yeah,
until I talked to you. That happened like this
yeah.
afternoon. I'm
Oh,
fine,
wow. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
so I really think there is just so much power in recognizing the um, sometimes the slightly unhelpful buddy system our body creates for us,
Oh, nice.
um,
Yeah,
with the tagging,
yeah,
because you then need to actually do the work to sometimes undo what are largely unhelpful tagging. It's
yeah,
it can end
yeah,
up,
absolutely.
yeah. And so if someone, so let's just say the person who's sensitive to everything right now,
Mhm.
what is the first layer of the onion? Is it actually working on cultivating a sense of safety? And
Mm.
what is that?
So it's parallel. So
Mm.
you do actually have to decrease exposure to threats, known
Hmm.
threats, right? Because you
And
want
is
to
that
give
so
your
your
body.
body can have like a holiday to actually do the
Yes,
work? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah. It just increases the neuroimmune's bandwidth.
Mm.
Okay. But whilst you decrease the threats, you also have to increase the safety signaling.
Yeah.
So the safety signaling is going to be things that your neuroimmune system will be a little bit like twitchy about when are you getting enough protein and fat? Are you getting enough regular meals? So actually my theory on that is something called FAST, which I'm currently fleshing out. So FAST are the five ancient survival threats. So from an evolutionary perspective, right? The things that your body had to worry about, that your mind, brain had to worry about were uh, predator.
Mm.
So anything that would be, threatening life, plague, viruses, bacteria, parasites, winter or any extremes of temperature, and famine. So
Mm.
not getting enough calories or energy in. And the last is threat or issues or maiming of your eight senses. Because your eight senses are a way of your body taking in information and being able to use that information to calculate risk.
Mm.
So those are the five senses that everybody knows. So that's your sight, your smell, your hearing, your taste, your touch. And the three that people are not that familiar with is going to be your vestibular. So where you are in relation to the ground, so your balance,
Mm.
proprioception, where your joints are in relation to each other. And these two are very important because your body needs to know where it is at all times so that it can run or it can fight if it needs to. If it has no idea what's going on, where you are in relation to the ground and where all the joints are in relation to each other, which happens all the time in people who are sitting down for extended periods of time, or lying down for that matter, for extended periods of time, at some point you feel like you need to stretch, because stretching is a way for the brain to take in that and get that information so that it can recalculate, okay, where are we, where are we, where are we, where are we? Because if your body doesn't know your brain doesn't know where things are,
Mm.
when a threat is presented, it then loses precious milliseconds in trying to figure all that out, and then you can run and then you can fight. And the last sense is interoception. So interoception is your ability to know what's up. In other words, are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you hot? Like those sorts of internal workings.
Mm.
So patients who have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, there is an issue with their interoception. In other words, the mind, the brain, and the body aren't talking to each other that well. In other words, they don't know to constrict the blood vessels of the feet as much as it should be doing when you go from a lying or sitting position to a standing position. So
Mhm.
fast is about trying to know what the ancient threats are that your ancient brain, i.e., the brainstem cerebellum, might be perceiving, and then trying to talk it down from a ledge.
Yeah.
So making sure that you are seeing enough natural light, i.e., sunlight. You're out in wide open spaces because you are not afraid of being seen by a predator, right?
Mm,
Are eating regularly. You're eating protein. You're eating fats because this isn't famine. This isn't winter.
mm,
You are spending time with people that you care about, who care about you, because then you clearly have a tribe, which is always helpful. That kind of stuff.
yeah.
Decreasing the threats, increasing the safety signals, and importantly, talking to yourself. So, for someone whose nervous system is fine, like, they're not wandering around talking to themselves, but when your nervous system is a little bit funny, I actually talk to myself out loud. The reason being is because your hearing is a very unique sense. It is,
Mm,
apart from smell, the only sense that we have that can alert us to threat behind us that we can't see. So it's very finely tuned, and it's developed as one of the first senses. So you have the hearing of a 25-year-old when you're born. You have the hearing of a 25-year-old at 7 months in utero. And it is also the last sense to go when you die, which is why in hospital we always say, hey, keep talking to them, because they can't see you, they can't talk, they can't really respond, but they can still hear you, right? So there's something very special about the sense of hearing, such that, myself included, and I tell this to all my patients, when something happens and you know, like a mosquito bite, for example, and it starts to swell, if you want to get on top of that, you talk to your neuroimmune system. Hey, you know what? I know that you're making me itch and scratch because you want me to remove the threat, but the threat is gone. It was a mosquito. It landed. I didn't see it. It, got its little proboscis into me, and now I know that there's swelling because you want to get the red blood cells there, the white blood cells, and get that lymphatic system moving. But you know what? The threat's gone. So you can stand down now. And I have actually gotten on top of those sorts of things just by talking to my neuroimmune system. Now, this is not black and white. In other words, if I am in a calm state and I'm in a good place and blah, 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 I can get on top of these sorts of things really easily. When
mm,
I am stressed, or when I am, traveling or whatever it is, it's not as simple, because your system is very much a fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
mm.
So, and
It's like, I
I
see what you're trying to
yeah,
do
yeah,
here.
you see, exactly,
Hmm.
and that's why, for patients who have experienced ACEs, so adverse childhood events, I mean, this is a huge study that's gone on for many, many years. If you people should look it up. It's an
Yeah, yeah.
amazing,
We've talked
a
about it.
long-term study.
Mm,
Oh, right, yeah. Then we can see that people who have suffered traumas, their neuroimmune systems tend to be twitchy. Why? Because it's suffered the traumas, it's trying to protect you.
mm,
It's trying to make sure that it decreases surprise, that it increases reaction times. So um, I I think that patients, yes, whilst you decrease the threats, also know that at some point you want to reintroduce them, because fear is probably the worst of the emotions. So fear
yes.
of foods, fear of the environment, fear of the this, fear of the that. Um, you want to go, okay, I have made a decision that I am not going to have gluten,
Mm,
because right now my body's not happy with gluten and it's going to make me bloat. Now, of course, we're not talking about celiacs here, okay?
mm,
Right. So then I'm going to work on my safety signals. I'm going to do meditation. I'm going to do these long walks. I'm going to, whatever it is that increases those safety signals. And at some point, you're going to say, okay, I feel like I would like to try this pasta
mm.
because I want this, and whatever it is that you need to say to yourself.
Yeah.
So I did a personal experience because I've been to hospital with gluten sensitivity.
Mm.
And this is back in the day when gluten sensitivities weren't even recognized as a thing, right?
Yeah. Oh,
We now
I
have
hear you. Yeah.
right,
20
right.
years ago, I was a leper for being gluten
Yes,
sensitive. Yeah.
exactly, because it was all in your head and you're some
Mm,
whatever, it's a fad and all that kind of stuff. And now, of course, we know about non celiac gluten sensitivity, and we know that it's part of it is got the glyphosates and the herbicides. Anyway, it's a full spectrum of things, but we know from lived experience with our patients and ourselves, it's a thing.
Mm.
What do you do? So I used to be very sick. I think I've said this on a few podcasts. I used to be very sick. I used to have polycystic ovaries and anxiety and depression and asthma and hay fever and all sorts. And at some point, I got better. Um, but now I can have pasta, no problem.
Mm.
Whereas before, I used to bloat up and look 6 months pregnant. And at one point, it was so bad with the cramps and the pain that I wound up in hospital.
Mm.
So
Wow. But I hear you on the cramps. I never wound up in hospital, but I used to cramp terribly and I don't anymore.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
exactly that. So people need to know it's possible. It's
Mm.
possible. It's possible. It's possible, right? Because so many of us are caught in a system where these things are happening to us, these things are happening at us.
Yes.
We're getting all these symptoms, we're fighting our body, we can't get the help that we want. Like it's just, it seems as if everything is stacked against us. But
Mm.
once you just a little bit, right, start to realize that, wait, hang on a second, my body's trying to protect me. What does it think it's protecting me from?
Mm.
Okay, let me give you a little bit of a holiday, but we are in charge and we're not afraid.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's then increase these safety signals. I'm going to go through a period where I'm going to really look after myself, blah, blah, blah. And then you start to slowly see that because you're exhibiting less fear, fear drives pro-inflammatory molecules in the body because
Hmm.
it's evolutionary conserved. That's what you do with a threat. You increase inflammation because that's, in the short term it's protective. And anyway, then you decrease the inflammation that's, inflammatory molecules that are running around your body, and you realize you're not as reactive.
Mm.
That's where the gratitude practices come into play, right? And if you fall off the wagon a little bit, or oh, okay, well, hey, you know what? That's okay. Thank you so much for increasing inflammation because you think there's a threat. What happened is, and so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
it's so
I
nice. You've got my back, and I really love that about you. But the thing
Yeah,
is, like, we're
the thing
fine.
is,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've seen remarkable shifts in
Mm.
patients because
Oh,
of that.
I mean, you talked a little bit about this when we got together talking mold
Oh,
last
goodness,
year,
definitely.
and I have taken some of the self-talking suggestions, and they have absolutely helped me quell, uh, like the buddy system freak out. Like, I'm just gonna put your mind at rest, little buddy. There, we're actually fine. We just moved house, and it's probably just kicked up a bit of dust. And, fair enough that that would make you think, oh, dust, mold, bad. This is bad, bad, bad. And then fine, watching TV as if I'd never even had an inkling that I was going to have an inflammatory
Oh dear.
cascade, right?
I'm teary now because
It
it's
matters.
it matters. Our neuroimmune system is trying so hard for us in
Mm,
this day and age with so many threats. And bless its cotton socks. Like it's trying so hard that sometimes it gets just that little bit too twitchy and then prevents us from living like normal people in today's world.
mm,
But when we start working with our neuroimmune systems, actually it can calm down a little bit. Then you add in all the things that you talk about, the swapping out the chemicals for the more natural stuff, the better airflow, the better light, all these things, and you wind up living a beautiful, happy existence with your neuroimmune system.
yeah. And I think, like, so would you say stress is really something that confuses our buddy system?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
100%.
if you find yourself reacting all of a sudden all the time, and it's, oh my God, what is wrong with me lately? One thing on
Hmm.
top of another, we
Yeah.
go to the stress. What is stressing you out? I mean, it's Chinese medicine, right? They've been talking about it
Right.
for 6,000 years. There must be something to it. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. But
Just maybe.
just
Yeah.
maybe. But you're
Mm,
absolutely right. Because the interesting thing about stress, whether it's psychological stress or physical stress or emotional stress, stress is going to elicit the same biochemical response. This is
Mm,
outside of the same electromagnetic response and frequency responses in your brain and all that. This is just the biochemical part of things.
mm.
In other words, if you lose your car keys, there's going to be a little bit of adrenaline, there's going to be a little bit of cortisol.
I can
If you are
feel that feeling. I know that feeling. Yeah.
if you are being hunted by a saber-toothed tiger, it is the
Mm,
exact same hormones that are going to
mm,
be pumped through your body. Yes, the amount is a lot more, but when you have the fight with the husband as well as losing your car keys, and then your child falls down and breaks their arm, and this and that, and this and that, your system doesn't get a reprieve from those
mm,
chemicals. And your ancient brain goes, holy shit, are we in the middle of a famine, a plague, a war? Like, what is happening? Why is there no reprieve? Don't you worry, I got your back. I'm going to
mm.
increase until I can find the threat. And then
Yeah.
before you know it, you've got an
Mass
autoimmune disease.
cells, let's go, go, go.
Go, go, go. Right, that's exactly it.
Oh my God. And so maybe it's not such a great idea to devour social media on like really big news days like everybody does. I genuinely
I
think
don't.
this is a huge part of it. I used to
Mhm.
indulge in so much more political content, big bad news happening. I remember like being on Twitter when Osama bin Laden was shot and like
Yeah.
just
Yep.
being glued to it all for like 5
Yep.
hours because, whoa,
Yep.
baby, it's all going down. And now it's not that I don't care for a peaceful world. I think it's just that my view has shifted on how that gets cultivated. And it actually gets cultivated by saying, that's not healthy.
Yep.
I can't even
100%.
affect. I can't even
Yes.
affect any of that anyway. So what's my mind going and doing, worrying about all of that? That doesn't make
I've got
me a
this funny
careless
story.
human. But
I
that's,
know.
but now we're told we're careless humans for not
I
knowing
know.
what's going on in every single global conflict intimately. But in
Yeah.
my ancient life, I wasn't in my tribe going, hey, I think there might be
What's
other
happening over in
continents.
Somalia?
And on those other continents, I bet they're fighting over there. Let's worry about that. Like we
Right.
didn't. But the
Yeah.
modern human is. And we have to
Mhm.
kind of broaden our realization, I think, of just how much these inputs are impacting us. I mean, of course they
You know,
would. It's amazing
I
we've
actually,
lasted this long still
yeah,
standing.
I actually detox off mainstream media and TV and all the rest of it for maybe about a year or so. And
Mm.
one day I was at this is my ex-partner's house, and I was in bed, and he was uh, in the living room watching Border Patrol.
Ooh, ah.
And
Yeah, that's
just the sound of the
mm,
music and how
mm,
they talk at things and at each other and all the rest of it, I realized that my heart rate was sort of going up, but I hadn't put those two things together.
hmm
So I just thought that I wasn't tired. So I went out, sat with him, and I was watching, and my heart rate went through the roof. My blood pressure
mm,
went up because I had an aura ring, and I realized that it was it. If you detox yourself off that kind of stuff, even just 10-15 minutes of a mainstream media TV show, movie can really elicit that sympathetic fight flight response.
hmm
I was so amazed at how sensitive I was to it after that.
Yeah, well, it's like
Um,
detoxing people off synthetic fragrances. And
oh
then
my
you go to your grandma's house and then she's using the sheets and the cuddly this and I mean, every possible fabric softening tool you could, and then
right.
you feel winded, like,
You
oh
do,
my
you
God, I
do.
can't breathe.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I
like,
actually find it very difficult with Uber.
yeah,
Actually, you get
oh,
in,
uh-uh.
and their artificial fragrances that
hmm
they pump through those things. I feel so sorry for all these like endocrine disrupted drivers.
I teach
You
them.
know,
I can't help
yeah,
it. I'm like, look, I'm going to share something with you. You can take it or leave it. But if this was my job, sitting in this enclosed car this many
yeah,
hours of my week, I would
yeah,
want to make sure that wasn't going to impact my ability to have babies one day. Do you want me to talk to you about it? They're like, what do you
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah. It's really
Yeah.
bad, and more companies. are trying to have these signature fragrances so that when you
Mm.
walk in, it's going to remind, it's going to put you in a state to buy more things or whatever it is that they're trying to do.
Oh, yeah.
Kukai
Mm-hmm.
is has a very specific fragrance. A lot of hotels have that too. And
Yeah, the Pullman hotels. I remember
oh,
like,
yes.
oh my God. And I've written to them a bunch of times. And
Mm,
yeah, you can't. Yeah. Anyway,
no.
I mean, synthetic fragrances is where we've ended up, certainly by no intention. But suffice it to say, if we fill our world and our lives with too many things for too long that don't serve us, let's try and realize that earlier than needing a wake-up call.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
where I'd
absolutely.
like for us to end. Don't you think that's a
Yeah.
nice place to end?
I think that's a beautiful
Yeah.
place to end. Yeah,
Let's
absolutely.
cultivate some safety for each other. Let's teach our little buddy that he doesn't need to be such an overreactive shitbag sometimes and just let
Yeah,
us be
exactly.
free and happy
Yeah.
and light and joyful. And I think it's no accident that the voices that are talking about cultivating that are getting louder because we're onto something. So I
Oh,
really
yeah.
appreciate all of your wonderful work and sharing from all the conferences that you go to and speak at as well, because, those are things that not everybody can go to, but they give you hope that medicine might be headed in a pretty cool direction. And so from where we started, broken system, to where we ended, empowered people, that is the path forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this chat.
Me too. Thank you. I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.